President Trump returns to the White House in what's now essentially an active COVID hotspot. A new hurricane threat for the Gulf, and Hollywood throws in the towel on 2020 at the movies. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Tuesday, October 6th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hey, Carlo. Good morning.
Jill, what is happening right now? I seriously, what is going on? The president is a active COVID patient in the White House, probably shedding disease, getting pumped full of steroids and experimental drugs, and we're 4 weeks from an election. Like, what?
It's bonkers.
Jill, if you woke up from a 6-month coma and I told you that, you would say, Carlo, come on, man. Like, take it down a notch.
And there's so much other crazy stuff, too. It's like that you can't even make up.
Sure.
Okay, let's get to it. President Trump, likely still infectious with COVID-19, is waking up in his own bed this morning. The president made a dramatic staged return to the White House after being discharged from Walter Reed last night, even though he had not completed his course of treatment. Standing at the entrance to the residence, the president took off his mask and then recorded a video telling Americans not to let the virus, quote, dominate your lives. He then walked into the residence maskless, and his comments drew immediate condemnation from medical professionals and public health experts who had hoped that perhaps the president's own illness would change his cavalier attitude toward the disease. If anything, Carlo, it seems to have done the opposite, with a complete lack of awareness that perhaps most Americans don't have the same access to treatment that he does. It's like he's completely unaware that the way that his case was handled is not what happens for, I was about to say 99% of Americans, but how about like anybody else?
Well, Jill, you're telling me you don't have a helicopter on retainer to airlift you to the best hospital in the world to get experimental drug cocktails? Look, I mean, I'm almost at a loss of words today. This does get at something that's really been bugging me the last few days, which is sort of this talk about how we have to, like, beat the virus. We can't let it dictate our lives. Dr. Conley, who's the president's attending physician at Walter Reed, he said over the weekend during one of those press conferences, quote, "I didn't want to give any information that might steer the course of illness in another direction." Sorry, what? It's a virus. It doesn't care what you say about it.
It's not listening. Like,
yes,
by
exactly.
the way,
I mean,
it doesn't. It's not watching the press conference.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I agree. To an extent, I agree that, like, we do have to learn to live with this thing, at least for the time being, right? We can't just all stay in our homes forever. But the framing of this is this as though it's like this enemy that needs to be defeated through strength, as though it's like Al Qaeda or ISIS. I mean, it really reminds me of how we talked about, terrorism after 9/11. It's so stupid, right? All this thing is, like, as Thomas Friedman says, all it is biology, chemistry, and physics, right? Like, to your point, it does not care about whether or not we're brave or whatever. The messaging that we're starting to see from the White House is really concerning. This sort of line, Trump is a warrior, the threat is overblown, it's not going to kill you, look at how the president beat you, look at how the president beat it. I mean, first of all, has he beat it? I mean, I don't want to be sort of like macabre here, but it took Herman Cain a month between the time he was infected and when he died. As we know, just from covering this thing for so long, it ain't over after a couple days. And what you said earlier, Jill, not everybody has the world-class, resources that the president of the United States has. I mean, the message that he sent last night is the exact wrong message, and it will probably get people killed, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's, I think, for me, the most frustrating part of it. It's just like this lack of self-awareness here. It's almost like he genuinely doesn't understand that most people don't have access to the care that he has. And I think on the one hand, we have made a lot of progress, right? If you got this today versus if you were diagnosed in March, we do have tools in the arsenal, right? I mean, we have remdesivir if you can get it. We have this steroid dexamethasone. I'm sorry for the name is
Dexamethasone, yeah.
dexamethasone. These are tools, right? These are things that we
Right.
now know actually work. But the way that he's the president, he was just immediately having 24-hour a day care, and it's just it is not only irresponsible, and then for him to say, I feel better than I did 20 years ago. Maggie Haberman in the New York Times wrote, he's framing the virus as something akin to a weekend at a spa. It's.
Well,
I'm speechless because it's just so, it really, this could have been a real moment for him to turn around and say, guys, this thing is no joke. Wear a mask. We have to take this seriously. We'll beat it, but we've got to do X, Y, and Z. But instead to say, no big deal, it's not right.
Well, I mean, the thing about him saying, I feel better than I did 20 years ago, that's the dexamethasone talking, right? I mean, anybody who has taken a steroid will tell you that's how it makes you feel. It makes you feel like unstoppable, right? This is why baseball players used to take steroids, right? Like that's not good. We don't need that. We don't want the president to feel, like an unstoppable, force. I don't know.
It's just, meanwhile, the White House itself is basically a COVID hot zone right now. So this outbreak in the West Wing is continuing to grow. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany, 2 of her staffers, just the latest members of the president's orbit to test positive. 2 members of the White House housekeeping staff are positive. 3 members of the White House press corps are positive. And I just want to note, I mean, this is one of the issues when we talk about testing, right? And a lot of experts have come on to say these rapid antigen tests are great, right? But again, they're not the silver bullet.
Exactly.
So, there's a reason they say that if you've been in direct contact with somebody who's had the virus, you need to quarantine for 14 days. Like, that's the thing. That's the rule.
Right.
So for Kayleigh McEnany to basically have said, well, I took an antigen test and I don't have it, there's a reason the rule is to quarantine for 14 days. So now she potentially exposed all of these reporters at the White House and anybody else.
There's video of her yesterday briefing the press without a mask on, knowing that she, like, my head is actually going to explode today.
It's not right for there's reporters. I've been listening to a lot of interviews with reporters who are like, I'm scared. I felt safer in Korea than I do in the White House.
There are more active COVID cases at the White House right now than there are in Taiwan, New Zealand, and Vietnam combined. Just think about that. In the White House.
Oh, sorry. I took your line, Carlo.
No,
I wasn't following.
No, it's okay.
Okay, we are just to anyone listening. Carlo and I are so worked up today. I went totally. I didn't realize Carlo and I write some notes in here, and he was going to give.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, Carlo. I'm totally stepping on you.
That's quite all right, Jill.
Yes, the CBS News correspondent who said that he felt safer covering North Korea than he did covering the White House. I think it's a point that's worth repeating.
Totally.
Okay, New Yorkers, by the way, once again at the mercy of their 2 most powerful politicians, sowing confusion over public health guidance. You've got Governor Cuomo now refusing to allow shutdowns of non-essential businesses in 9 New York City zip codes, seeing new outbreaks after Mayor de Blasio had announced these new targeted lockdowns. However, schools in those neighborhoods are actually going to close today, a day earlier than planned. So I guess they agree on the schools, but not on the businesses.
Well, they don't even agree on the schools because de Blasio had the schools closing Wednesday. Cuomo came out and said, no, they're actually going to close Tuesday. I think just to needle him, I think. I mean, I know we talked about this yesterday, but like these 2 men hate each other, and we're all basically, forced to witness it. It was cute for a while, but this has got to stop. Like, it's really, it's not funny anymore. Get it together, guys. Come out with a joint statement, like figure it out behind closed doors, and tell people what's happening. Like, these dueling press conferences are just confusing people. I mean, even I'm confused. And again, I follow this constantly. I don't know if there's any other place in the country that has this extraordinarily dysfunctional local government and state government, but it's like a public health menace at this point. Like, you guys got to figure, like, what is the deal? What are we closing? What is not closing? When is it starting? Like, it's not really that much to ask.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's as expected, by the way, Long Island, the rate of infection is still overall less than 1%, but there are certain neighborhoods like Lawrence in the South Shore where it's up at 5%. So, as goes New York City, it starts to trickle out, unfortunately.
Exactly.
Hurricane Delta, meanwhile, formed in the southern Gulf of Mexico, putting the U.S. Gulf in the path of a potential hurricane landfall for the fourth time this year. The system is rapidly gaining strength, and the northern Gulf Coast from Louisiana to the Florida Panhandle should be prepared for a possible direct hit by the end of the week.
Yeah, I think this is the 25th named storm of the season. It's just absolutely phenomenal. Phenomenal is probably the wrong word. It's absolutely just incredible. But on the topic of climate change, which this, of course, is part of, I did want to mention the story that was in Bloomberg yesterday. So, you've had a lot of large oil and gas companies that have started to put some timelines on saying that they're going to get to net zero emissions. So Royal Dutch Shell, BP, they've come out and been like, we're working on it. We realize that we have to get our emissions. We have to at least get them on the decline, right? ExxonMobil, not only not doing that, they're actually increasing their annual CO2 emissions by as much as the entire output of Greece. This is according to leaked internal this is leaked internal documents that Bloomberg got a hold of that show that Exxon, which is the largest oil producer in the U.S., has calculated that its growth strategy will yield a 17% increase in planet warming emissions by 2025. So I just wanted to mention that story. It's a big story just because Trump sucks the air out of everything else. It's not getting the play that it probably should. So yeah, just remember that. Thank you, Exxon. Not on behalf of not just us living humans, but on behalf of Jill's daughter,
she's a living human.
Yes, sorry. I phrased that the wrong way. Yes, of course she is.
It's for your unborn daughter.
My unborn daughter or son. Yes, thank you, Exxon. We won't forget it.
Incredible, Carlo. I'm glad you mentioned that because it's not getting a lot of play. And we always cover the companies that are doing right, and who are saying, and by the way, they'll put out like a side story, like we're building an energy efficient plant in somewhere, and then we'll all cover that.
Yes, exactly.
But we'll kind of miss the big story. Okay, Netflix finally making it a little bit less confusing to find new content to watch. So if you stream Netflix on a connected TV, you're soon going to see a new and popular menu tab next to the top 10 column. And there's also going to be a worth the wait tab that groups shows and movies coming to the platform up to a year in advance. So I still am confused, by the way. How does this help?
Well, I think the idea is, I think, Jill, you and I have talked on the pod before about just how confusing it is to a lot of these streaming services, but particularly Netflix. Just they're really hard to interact with, right? Netflix. When I go to Netflix on my Apple TV, there's a thing that's new releases, and then right below it there's recently added. Like, what is the difference? Why are those two separate things? When I'm watching, my wife and I are rewatching The Sopranos. We have to do it from the phone now because there's no HBO Max app on the Apple TV. It's like the whole interface is just really bad. But the point of the Netflix, these new tabs, I think, it's just part of the strategy to reduce churn, right? The kryptonite of any subscription service is churn. This idea that people, nobody's locked into these subscriptions, so they just cancel them if there's nothing to watch. So they just have to constantly be giving you new content. So that's sort of the idea here.
And I'm kind of giggling. Because I have so many. I can never find anything on any of these on Netflix.
It's impossible.
So I basically just wind up rewatching the same. I've been watching Pride and Prejudice now for like 4 months. My husband will come in. He's like, "Are you still watching this?" And there's one part where my dog barks like crazy, and it's like every night at the same part. It's torture. But the other part that always drives me nuts too is if I'm watching a series at the same time that my husband is, but we're at different parts. So then I'll just go to turn it on, and I'm like, what? Who? Like, what? When did this happen to this person? And then it's like, oh my God, I'm not in the right season, or I'm not in the right episode. Has that ever happened to you?
It happens to me with the HBO. I don't even know if I should say this, but I think that my father's pays for an HBO subscription that is used by probably a significant portion of like the population of Brooklyn at this point. Like my wife and I use it. I think my brother's ex-girlfriends use it. My sister and her husband. So it's just, there's constantly, when it's like continue watching, there's like 50 shows on it.
Totally. And then I'll say to my husband, I'm like, when were you watching this? And he's like, not me. And we're like, who's been in here? I guess this is the problem when you're sharing your password. But
first world
by
problem,
the way,
I guess.
Reed Hastings, who is the CEO of Netflix, has said this is not something he's not upset that people share passwords, by the way. So we're not doing
whatever
a terrible
keeps
thing.
eyeballs.
Yeah, that's exactly what he has said. On this topic that we hit yesterday, which is just this lost year at the movies, Warner Brothers pulling the plug on one of the biggest movies of the holiday season. So the highly anticipated Dune adaptation is being pushed almost an entire year to next October. So this decision effectively amounts to Hollywood throwing in the towel on 2020 altogether. It comes as Regal is temporarily reclosing all of its theaters.
Yeah, again, I don't mean to spend too much time on this story. I just think it's really important, especially because, it's not just these theater chains, Regal and AMC. There's also these small movie houses and these regional chains that are starting to just turn off their marquees for good. There was a story in Variety yesterday that I'm linking to in the newsletter this morning, just about some of these local movie theaters in places like Wisconsin, some of these regional chains like Marcus Theaters, which has locations sort of in the, I guess you'd call it the Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, Ohio. And they're just hanging on by a thread, and they're probably not going to make it. And it's just, it's just sad. It's all of the downstream effects from this year. We're just going to feel them for a long time, and I hope that we're prepared for that.
And I'm someone who thoroughly enjoys the experience of going to see a movie. I don't do it as much as I used to, even pre-COVID. But
something about having a baby makes that hard.
No, but it is like a cultural, it's a communal thing, right? And all of these sort of things that we're going to yearn for, are they going to be there when we want them? These experiences that we want, and even these restaurants. Again, I will admit, I'm not comfortable with indoor dining right now.
Me neither.
But I also want to support these. I don't want these restaurants to go away. I love going to restaurants,
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it, Jill. Like you were talking the other day, about how James Hamblin at The Atlantic was telling you that he thinks that concerts will be back in the summer of 2022. But you're right. Maybe musicians will be ready then, but will there be concert venues then? I don't know. I mean, how are these places going to make it until then?
And we'll be ready, right? But will they exist, right? I've now watched how many streaming concerts and whatever. Not the same thing.
Not the same.
And even offices, remote work, not the same. I miss coworkers. I'm not ready for people to. I'm not even personally ready to be back in the office, and I'm not ready for. We're not ready as a society to have what we did with open offices again. But I miss the camaraderie and being creative and talking to people in the hall and whatnot.
Absolutely.
Okay, finally, archaeologists in Egypt have found 59 pristine I don't know how to say this. What is this word? And I can't believe I don't know it.
Sarcophagi. It's the plural of sarcophagus.
in an ancient burial ground south of Cairo, most of which still have mummies inside. The discovery is said to be one of the most significant archaeological finds in decades. Officials opened up one of them in front of assembled media, revealing mummified remains still wrapped in ornate cloth. You could tell Carlo through this story, and this is not a Jill story at all.
No,
but tell us, Carlo, why this was important for you to get into the podcast today.
I just thought it would be nice to end on something a little less depressing. And this is a big archaeological find, as you said. But it also just sort of made me laugh because there's this video. My wife actually showed it to me yesterday because she was cutting it for her job, and there's this video of these Egyptian tourism ministers, and they're prying open the sarcophagus, and it's just like, have we learned nothing from like the movies? Like you never open the sarcophagus. That's like how that's how the end of days starts. So I just thought it was sort of like a very fitting 2020 story. Like, you can't open the sarcophagus. Everybody knows that.
Especially not this year.
Yes.
I'm surprised you haven't commented on this coffee that I've been drinking, Carlo.
What is it? I can't see.
It's the size of
like
my head. I've made it. It's more just the size of it. I apologize if I was like a little too giddy today. I'm on zero sleep because my dog was up all night and I just could not sleep.
God.
So I'm like kind of wired right now. I'll crash in about an hour, I think. But you know how
I'm
it
sorry.
goes.
That's the worst feeling. But yeah, crazy news day. Let's see what develops today. By the way, we got a debate tomorrow. VP debate is tomorrow night. So I wouldn't want to I wouldn't want to be in a room with Mike Pence right now, just given the fact that he's been exposed to the president. But I think the plan is for it to go ahead. So we'll see.
They're putting up plexiglass in the middle between Kamala Harris and Mike Pence.
That'll help, I guess.
All right, everybody. That's what you need to know for Tuesday, October 6th.
All right, guys. See you tomorrow.